Hi, welcome to my show. Today's guest is Diana Plopa. Hi, Diana.
Hi.
So I invited Diane here. Well, the way I met you, by the way, is by hearing about your bookstore.
Right.
I heard that there's this new bookstore that was opening in Clawson, and a lot of authors were excited about it because rumor had it that you are very supportive of local authors.
Absolutely. Sure.
So members of Detroit Working Writers were very excited, and they were sharing the news. And I had planned to come, and my schedule kept being busier and busier, and finally I did come, and it was as supportive as your reputation was out there. So I would love to hear on how it came about that you opened the store, Scriptorium.
Sure. We've been open for just over a year. Our 1-year anniversary was August 1st. The goal was to provide support for local Michigan authors so that they could find a branch of readership for their books. It's very difficult for independent authors and self-published authors to find a place to put their books. Most mainstream bookstores and a lot of independent bookstores don't want to support them because it's risky to take a new unknown author and their book, put it on your shelves. Nobody knows how much money's going to be made. I decided I didn't want to focus on the money. I just wanted to focus on supporting those authors. As an independent author myself, I really wanted to support my tribe and help them to be as successful as they could be. So that was the impetus for really opening the shop. We were fortunate enough that we were able to acquire a used bookshop. The woman who owned it before us retired, so we acquired that shop, and then we rearranged and reorganized. So the front of the shop is now shelved with 300 titles written by Michigan authors.
Wow.
And we're getting new author titles in every day. I just got a couple over the weekend.
I can imagine, yes.
It's very exciting.
Well, I only came in recently, like I think it was about a month ago that I came in and had my books there. And aside from the fact that the bookstore is, it feels so community-oriented.
Yeah.
The activities that you have, the events that you have there, and you have the Wednesday night, if you want to talk a little bit about that, which I ended up, by chance, the first day that I came into the store, it was a Wednesday night, and I saw it was like, okay, there's 2 hours of people that can just sit and write.
Exactly.
And I thought, oh, let me try this out. And I did.
Our focus, in addition to supporting Michigan authors, was to create a literary community for local artisans. So we have space in our shop that is filled with tables and chairs. We have free Wi-Fi. People can come in and sit down and work on whatever artistic program they really want to do.
And you don't forget the coffee and snacks.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. So we have open areas for people to come and they can work on their writing.
Yes.
They can work on their art. We have some cover artists who occasionally come in. We have some high school students who occasionally come in and work on homework.
I did notice it's very diverse with the type of people that are there, but the atmosphere is still very comfortable where people can just work on their own
thing. We wanted to invite people in as though they were family. So I laugh and I tell people, come on in, kick off your shoes, grab a cup of coffee and a snack, and just sit down and work on your stuff. Mm-hmm. So often we are drawn away from what we are passionate about because of those things that distract us, home and dishes and laundry and children and husbands and dogs. And so I wanted to create a space that was artistically friendly so that people could just come in and focus on their work. So Wednesday nights from 7 to 9 p.m. is our Prose Procrastinators Anonymous writing group.
Okay, I didn't know the title.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. And it's concentrated writing time. Mm-hmm. So it's not coffee clutch. It's come in, bring your project either on a computer or on hard copy, sit down and work in community with other creative souls. And if you have a plot problem or a character conundrum or a simple question about something that you're running up against, there are approximately 12 to 15, sometimes more, other people that you can bounce your ideas off of and get your questions answered. We also have a monthly mastermind networking group called the Idea Lab, where people who work within, or I should say under the literary umbrella, cover artists editors, authors, aspiring authors, publishers. They all come together once a month, and we brainstorm and we solve problems, and there's always a keynote speaker, so we can help each other out in that way. We have a monthly critique group, and then we have a fourth Friday of every month, we have an open mic where people can come and share their work and practice performing out loud.
Oh, that's one thing I haven't done. I've done some of the other ones that you just mentioned I've been to. Can you, where are you located at exactly for people?
So we're at 145 East 14 Mile in Clawson. We are at 14 Mile in just east of Main Street. We're tucked behind the Black Lotus Brewery and also kind of kitty corner to Noble Fish, the sushi market, and we're right next door to Ace Hardware.
Okay. So your bookstore came after you have a long literary career. So it didn't start with the bookstore is your most new venture.
The bookstore is the latest adventure.
It's the latest, yes. But you have quite a bit going on. You're an author of 5 books, is it? Or
six, but one is out of print.
Yes. And also you have a publishing company,
yes.
and you also which publishes other authors' works.
Yes.
So you're quite busy. And how did that all start? Even with regards to your writing, I mean, you were telling me your story the other day about your son and how you used your time really wonderfully, wisely, creatively, to become who you wanted to become.
Sure.
So if you can share a little bit of that background and then how it developed into the business aspect of it.
Okay, sure. I started writing stories when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I've been fascinated with the written word ever since. My father was instrumental in supporting us and teaching us literature when we were young children. We used to go to the library once a week and pick out new books. So that was a big part of growing up for me. I loved the escape that literature can offer. Then, as I grew older, I did more writing. I worked for the Detroit Jewish newspaper for a while. I wrote for local radio. I did some other freelance writing work. And then when my son was about 10, I decided to go back to college, because at that point I finally decided what I wanted to do. And I studied English with a concentration in creative composition. So that was really where my passion was in storytelling on the page. In 2012, we opened Grey Wolfe Publishing, which is an independent publishing house. We wanted to find a way to support local authors at a price they could afford and only service them in the way that they felt would best draw their vision. So rather than being a publishing house that dictates how they do things, we're a publishing house that mentors authors, and we support them in the way that they best see their vision to create a book. So really the publishing house, before we had opened the Scriptorium a year ago, we had already published almost 90 titles. Independently published authors, and then we do community service anthologies as well, where we send out a call for submissions on a particular genre topic. People send us their work on donation, and then we take all that work, compile it into an anthology, and then the proceeds from the sales of those books go to support various charities. The one we have out right now supports Doctors Without Borders.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Fascinating.
So it's important to us. The reason we were doing the community service anthologies is not just because community service is an important work to do in your life, but also because it was an opportunity to give unknown authors a chance to build their writing resume and build their portfolio. So we wanted to serve both ends of the spectrum.
That's wonderful. Well, this is what I really like, and I think that is why your name is out there, is because you're reputation of being very generous with authors, very supportive, very community-oriented. And what about your own personal literary world, your books? What have you written so far, and how did what did you start with first? I know you said that originally, I think that wasn't the first book a poetry book. That's the one that's out of print.
Yes, it was. That's the one that's currently out of print, specifically, consciously out of print. In my early 20s, I wrote a collection of poetry. For some reason, every teenager I've ever met has written a collection. I think everybody does it. We all write poetry because we think that's some wonderful esoteric thing. What I discovered is I'm a very poor poet. I published the book. I self-published it. I sold enough copies to break even, and I'm calling it a success, but I'm not republishing the book because it's considered Vogon poetry. It's really bad. I'm not going to redo it. I'm just going to call it done. I have this wacky notion. I want to write one book in each of the 33 major genres, and so I'm checking poetry off my list. The other genres I've written are a collection of short stories,
which one is that one? I'd like to bring it up. So you have...
Sure. So it's A Duck Quacks.
A Duck
is my
Quacks.
collection of short stories. This is just a wonderfully silly collection of romping through my imagination. You'll notice that the book is actually written by Drake, my duck muse. I simply typed it because flippers and keyboards don't really work.
Okay, is this him?
That's Drake.
That's Drake.
Yeah, Drake
I was going to ask you about this little guy.
Yeah, Drake has been a part of my life since I was about 7. He's been my muse. He's directed my creativity. This little guy that you see on the screen now was actually a gift from my son. He was about 8 or 9 years old, and he said, Mom, you're walking into a bookshop or you're walking to a coffee shop to write books, and you're talking to yourself. I know you're talking to Drake, but people are going to think you're a little nutty talking to yourself. So he gave me this little stuffed duck and said, now people won't think you're so nuts talking to yourself. And so I thought that was absolutely precious. So
yes, and I think he that was very smart also. He wanted to make sure that people know that his mom is sane.
That's right. That's right.
So he's very smart.
So that's my collection. And the collection of short stories actually came out of a challenge from my dear author friend, Donald Levin. And he said, you find short form so challenging, so now I'm going to challenge you to write it. And I said, oh, come on, you can't do that. And he said, yes, I can. So 3 months later, this book was born, and it came out of the support from Donald Levin, and he was just wonderful about it. He edited it as well, and he just did a fantastic job.
Great.
The second book that I wrote, not second chronology, but the next book is The Griffin of Greed, which is my children's fairy tale. And this is a medieval fairy tale that teaches children the importance of community service and forgiveness rather than collecting stuff. I thought it was an important message. So I wrote the book and got a great illustrator.
Sure. Do you go to schools or anything like that to talk about these books, especially particularly this one?
This one actually has only been out for about 18 months. And with building the Scriptorium and everything else, I really haven't had a lot of time to promote it within the schools. But if there's a teacher out there that would like to invite me to their classroom, I would love to do that.
Yeah, this would be like a perfect subject for
It's a wonderful story written for 2nd through 4th grade students. Younger students, you could read it to them, but really it's meant for 2nd to 4th grade.
Great.
The next book on my stack is a book called Free Will. And this is a satirical novel about what happens after death. So essentially, Rachel dies. She's standing between the gates of heaven and hell. She's told that free will is a real thing. She has to spend 7 days in a visitor's pass in both heaven and hell. And after she's done 14 days, she has to make a decision about where she's going to spend eternity using her free will to make that choice. This is a satirical novel. It's a giggle fest. It's not meant to be serious at all. It's a silly romp through my imagination and what I imagine the afterlife might hold. The next book is called A Tryst of Fate, and this book is a romance novel, but there's a twist in this romance novel in that it's unusual because the main character is a man, and this story is written from his point of view.
Can you hold that one up? Because I can't see.
Oh, sure.
I don't think I have it on my...
So
there it is, A Tryst of Fate.
Turn it right.
Okay,
there we go.
There we go.
So it's called A Tryst of Fate, and it's a romance novel written from a man's point of view.
Okay.
There is a mystery involved in this book. There is a love triangle involved in this book. It does have the prerequisite happily ever after, but it's not the ending you're going to expect.
Okay.
I like to take stories, play with them, kind of turn them inside out. and see what new things I can create. And then the final book that I created, which was actually the first book I wrote after the poetry book, was my memoir in single parenting, and this is called Wolfe Cub. Do we have that? Nope.
I don't see
Okay.
that one either, yeah.
So here it is. This is Wolfe Cub.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Let me turn it just right. There we go. It's interesting when I do book festivals. People see this cover and they think, oh, it's about wolves. How wonderful. It kind of is and it kind of isn't. My maiden name is Wolfe, and my son's last name is Wolfe. And so when I wrote this memoir about how I raised him as a conscious single parent, I decided to call the book Wolfe Cub. And this is the story of how we redefined our American family, because I didn't become a single parent because of death or divorce. I became a single parent out of choice. And I was very fortunate that my son Zachary's father was an active participant in the process, and he is extremely supportive. And Zachary and his father's extended family have a wonderful relationship, so we're very blessed. But in that book are tips and tricks about what we did, what we didn't do. It came out of two things. The first thing was my son's request. He asked me to write this book. He came downstairs one day and he said, "You're a really good mom." I said, "That's nice. What do you want?" And he said, "No, really, you're a really good mom." I said, "Yes, and?" He said, "I want you to write it down so that when I have children, I know the right way to do it." So when you have a request like that, it's difficult to deny it. So I wrote that. I wrote it with that in mind. But I had spent, from the moment I found out I was pregnant until he came to me that day, I think he was a junior in high school, I had been keeping a daily journal. So what I did is I took all of the journal entries from that time when he was growing up, from the time I was pregnant, from the time he was growing up, all the way through high school. I took those journal entries and compiled them into a book. It was important to me to make a plan to raise my child ahead of time. So the whole time I was pregnant, I thought about, what are the possibilities that could come up? How will I respond to them? What do I want to do to benefit my child's life? How do I want to move his life forward? What's the legacy that I want to leave for him? And I compiled that into a book, and much to my son's chagrin, it is filled with all kinds of baby pictures of him growing up.
Well, that is so beautiful that you actually took, these types of acts, they are acts of love. Mm-hmm. And you put all this love into it, and ahead of time thought of developing something so beautiful for your son.
Yeah, it was definitely written as a gift for him. If other people find it useful and they want to buy it, that's lovely. Mm-hmm. But it was specifically written as a gift for him.
But even before that, in the journaling process, you had put thought into about raising him. So aside from the developing it into a book, but the journaling process that you were doing, it wasn't just like, oh well, he took his first words today.
Exactly.
He did this. He did that.
Him.
There was something deeper that you were. It was
Yes.
Self-discovery, but not just as who you are as Diana, but also as who you will be as a mother.
Exactly. I wanted to consciously parent him, and so I wanted to make an intelligent plan ahead of time. And I did a lot of reading, and I laugh. I take what my parents did that was successful and repeated it, and what didn't work, I did the exact opposite.
Well, what would be one thing, like if you were to give one or two things, the best advice that you think out of this whole entire experience, what you have discovered? What would you give
raising
parents?
my son?
Yes.
I think the most important thing you can do is engage in conscious conversation with your children. No matter what it is they want to talk about, or no matter what they feel is important or valuable to them, you should honor that and engage in that conscious conversation. So when they say, hey, this thing happened to me at school, don't just say, oh, that's nice, dear. Sit down and ask them about it and engage with them and have a conversation. I learned very early that if I was accessible to my son by speaking with him, listening to him, and never penalizing him for speaking his mind, he is now 28 years old, and we have an amazing relationship, and we talk about nearly everything. And I believe that specifically came out of my choice to be very actively engaged in conversation with him from the time that he was very, very little. So that would be my most paramount parenting advice. Just talk to your kids, listen to what they have to say, and then don't penalize them for what's in their mind.
I love that. Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, when you hear it in theory too, it sounds like wonderful and it's the right thing to do, but to actually apply it, and you actually applied it.
It's the easiest thing in the world to do. Yeah, I know a lot of people who say that raising a child is one of the hardest things they do. I found it very, very simple because it was all very intuitive. Part of it was I made a plan ahead of time. While he was cooking, I made a decision about how I was going to handle certain things with love and appreciation and logic and support and mutual respect. So when he came along, following through on those things was very simple. And I find that when you treat children with respect, they have nothing but love and respect to give back. So it became very, very easy for me. We have had minimal arguments over our lifetime.
Oh, that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And especially
as I
the fact that you were a single, to top it off, I mean, I think the fact that you were a single mom, that there wasn't the kind of stress and pressure that sometimes when mothers say, well, I was a single mom, and that always seems to be associated with hardship.
Yeah, and it really wasn't.
In your case, it doesn't sound like the case.
It was the easiest, most comfortable thing I've ever done.
You know how to enjoy it.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it, is you have to enjoy it.
Yeah, because we become parents and sometimes we forget that we wanted this role and how valuable and wonderful and precious it is. Right.
And it's just like the writing experience. You know, I equate it, because when you're writing a book, it's that creative process, that nurturing process. Writing a book is about enjoying the process and enjoying all the different left turns and right turns and hills it takes you through.
You know what? I love that you brought that up, because that's a great similarity with that. That too we sometimes forget. Once we get into the business aspect of it, we forget why we even became writers to begin with. And it was all to experience that. And then the experience, we lose touch with that because we're so busy doing this and competing. Sometimes we step out of that.
And truly what it is it's honoring the creative process, honoring that internal, because it's an internal nurturing, truly, is what the creative process is. You have something in your soul that you want to bring out and share with somebody else, and you want it to be as good and as wonderful and as inspiring as you can make it. Same thing with raising children. Same thing. So when I write, I think about how my story can touch other people and do the best I can with it. I strive for excellence. I don't strive for perfection, because I believe that perfection is for God and not for people. So you go as close as you can to achieving excellence, and then you follow through with letting people know about the story. I was just at a book festival at Carytown in Ann Arbor yesterday, and it was cold and it was rainy and it was not a lot of fun, but we had a blast because we were sharing our creative children, for lack of a better word, with the public. And I always find those festivals tremendously engaging and rewarding, because I get to say, hey, look at this. This is something I created. You might enjoy it too.
Well, your attitude, your attitude is obviously makes a big difference.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, well, and you had said that you had returned, so I have 5 minutes left, and what I would love to do is just to hear a little bit about how you were able, going back to school, when your son was how old? 8?
He was 10.
10, okay. When he was 10 years old, being a single mom, going back to school, and in the just putting your life together. Working. Yeah, you didn't mention that part, but working full time, going back to school. What would you say to that, somebody that's in that situation, who, whether they want to go back to school, whether they want to write a book, and feeling like maybe they don't have that support? Sometimes people think that they need a certain type of support, and maybe in your case you had it outside of not necessarily a husband, but in other forms. There are so many people. Your parents can support you. Your children can support you, you know?
Well, it was interesting. Zachary was a tremendous support. First day of school, for me, he knew what day it was because we marked it on the calendar. And the first day of school, after dinner, we're watching television, and at one point he reached over, picked up the remote control, turned it off, and said, "So don't you have homework?" I just thought it was a wonderful role reversal at that age, but that in itself was tremendous support because he said, "Mom, I know this is important to you and I want to help you do it." My writing support group is tremendous. The other thing that I think is important is, even if you don't have a large support group around you, find people who will support you.
Yeah, I was going to say,
and
some
then
people, if you...
what's critical is recharge your own batteries. Do things that are going to feed your heart and your soul, because if you don't do that, you won't have the energy to work full-time, raise a child, go to school, wash the dishes, whatever that is, write a book. Remember to recharge your own batteries, even when you're working on a book. I was stuck in writing a book, and that's why Donald came to me and said, "Okay, you're stuck on your novel. Why not shift gears and write something else until you get unstuck?" And it was because of his support saying, "Yes, you can do this," that it was able to get done.
Well, and his support came along because you put the intent out there.
Correct.
Once we put the intent out there and we want something, so even though it feels like we're stuck for a while, but the answer would come because we actually put our heart and our minds out there.
Exactly. And what's really important is you must attach action to intent. So, yes, I want to write a book. Well, the book's not going to get written unless you put your butt in the chair and keep fingers on the keyboard and get the book written. And then having that outside support of other authors, as we have at the Scriptorium on Wednesday nights, having that support group is tremendously inspiring.
Well, I got to say, I really encourage people to, especially writers, but also students or whoever is interested in writing or wants to hang out in a place that's like in a literary world, to go to the Scriptorium in Clawson. But I have to say that when you said that it requires action and we put the intent and all that, but also I think it requires courage. And
Correct.
What you said, what you said in the beginning about the poetry book, it is true. I have many friends that have shown me their notebooks of poetry that they wrote when they were younger. I don't know any of them that took the step of going and publishing their book.
Right.
Despite
it does take a tremendous amount of courage.
So the fact that you had that kind of confidence within yourself, and so I urge people, this is really how it starts, is to have that kind of confidence, and
believe
then
in
it evolves.
yourself.
Believe in yourself.
And follow through on the dream. That's really the message.
And really, you did that, and here you are. You have a publishing house, and you're helping so many authors, and you have a wonderful bookstore and 5 books, and how many are left? How many genres are?
Yeah, I haven't really done the math, but I can tell you I'm working on 3 different novels simultaneously right now. So.
Okay. So you lead the life that you want to lead. You're living your dream, and congratulations to you.
Thank you so very much.
And I hope that the audience that is watching, and I know this is for sure because I felt that way. That's why I invited you on the show. When I met you, I was really inspired by your positivity and your willingness to share and help.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So, yes. So, so for people that want to succeed in the literary world or any place, the formulas that you use, anywhere. Yes. Well, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun.
We'll invite you back again when you have some more books published. Okay?
Yeah, hopefully this time next year there will be a new one out.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.